Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Only Murders in the Building, Season 3, Episode 9. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I love that opening with Mabel, and I was like, where's this going? When she's like, wait, no, I came here to visit my friend, and she's giving birth, triplets, and then just that whole weird situation of like the two babies, and it's Charles and Oliver, and then like the third is the microphone. It's like, oh, it's a podcast, because her dream was like, when she was younger, it's like when she was going to be older, she was like, oh, I'm going to be married to Josh Hartnett and have like 2 kids. And I'm like, which made me, I wish I'd looked into it. I'm like, I wonder, have they ever met in real life? Josh Hartnett and Selena Gomez. Just curious. I'm also curious, like, have they ever worked on anything together? I think it'd be funny if they did in some shape or form. Just that just make that a little funny. I think it'd probably be even funnier, more interesting if they never met. In fact, it'd be funnier if they met after this, because I think it'd just be kind of like this cute thing of like, not anything would come of it, but just the fact is it'd be funnier, like, oh, they mentioned that in the show and then they just like meet or whatever. I don't know. I wonder, could that has been chosen? Because maybe like when Selena was younger, maybe that was like one of her like celebrity crushes, was Josh Hartnett. Mine personally being Alyssa Milano. I've always talked about that time and time again. I've had the biggest crush on her since I was like a preteen / teenager. Anyway, tangents and all that aside, it's really sweet how like Mabel was so worried about Oliver. I mean, to be fair, Charles was too. About like, no. Like, are we really just gonna like? He's been here for like 5 days. Like, are we really just gonna like send him right back out there in the world? Like, yeah, you put a stent in his heart, but really, is that enough? And both of them, no. Like, should we run more tests? And it's like, no, everything seems good. But Charles is like, I wasn't really worried. But Oliver's like, I might have been slipping in and out of consciousness, but I heard you weeping. And it's like, oh, you're kind of like my best friend, you SOB. And it's just like, yeah, both of them being so concerned, even to the point Mabel didn't actually want to watch any of Detective Williams' interrogations without Oliver. And it's like, oh, look at her being a big old soft thing. She's like, no, it's not like I really cared about it. Shut up. And I was like, it's super adorable, I even loved it, like, oh, the opening for the podcast is like, oh, it takes 2 to tango, 3 to solve a murder. And I was like, the team is back together. I think it's very poetic that at the very end of the season, where they've kind of pieced everything together, that like, it just shows how well they work together, that as a team, they're the ones who piece it together, because it's almost like that Stranger Things situation where everyone in Stranger Things, I mean, a lot of shows do it, but Stranger Things really personifies the whole aspect of, hey, you have so many different groups who all have pieces to the puzzle, but it's only when they all come together that you get every facet of it. So it's kind of like that, where everyone kind of was tackling the situation. They weren't all, like, obviously she's the only one that's been actively working on the investigation the entire season. Charles and Oliver have been caught up in their own circumstances, but their sides of the stories have led to pieces of this murder investigation. So, but now it's like, right, we got to figure out whether or not Dickie actually murdered Ben or not, because it's the only way to prove Loretta didn't do it, and she only confessed to do it to protect Dickie, her son. So, when it's all said and done, they actually go visit Dickie, and I love his like matter of factness of like, oh, you guys thought I was a suspect, and it's like, do you think so now? They're like, no, of course not. But where were you? He's like, well, basically, I was so pissed about Ben, pissed at Ben for stealing the whole Cobra thing. Like, yes, I was upset by it, but then like he got on my nerves. I got drunk, and then I put on a Cobra suit and went to visit his 5 whores and score some coke. And it's like, wait, is that what Ben was up to? It's like, that's why Dickie ended up like trying to clear his system, because as we learned from Jonathan, like because they had brought that up previously about Jonathan saying like, oh, I got this concoction from Ben's doctor, because it's the same concoction that Ben had, but it wasn't brought up in his report. So that was a theory, was like, oh, maybe that was a twin thing, and that's what, I was connecting that of like, oh, maybe it's Ben's twin that's there, rather than that. Maybe that's why the toxicology came up clean. It's like, well, it's because Dickie got rid of it because he didn't want any news to spread about what was in Ben's system, and so he ended up kind of getting the poison, like, like did not, that didn't get covered in the toxicology because they were covering everything up. But either way, so, but I was like, oh, Dickie had a alibi, so why would there be an issue? Why would Loretta need to confess? It's because the cops didn't fully believe his alibi, because there's a photo, there is evidence, I think, like probably like from like surveillance footage or something. There's picture of him, but the problem is you can't really make out his face, so it wasn't a slam dunk of an alibi. So, but it's like, all right, for them this was enough to be like, okay, Dickie didn't do it. So they later on tracked down his 5 whores. Interestingly enough, turns out that it's not a whore and coke situation, which obviously they're leading into the stereotype of like, oh yeah, like you're rich and powerful, that's what you do, yada yada yada, so on and so forth. But it turns out Ben was actually part of a sewing club. I think it's so interesting because at the end of the day, Ben, and I talked about this in the previous episode, that at the end of the day, Ben was very insecure. He had a lot of self-esteem issues. And I think, once again, him acting like a dick, it's him overcompensating, because it's like, this is what I got to do. I got to puff myself up. And yes, I'm going to be dickish to other people, but it's the only way I can make it feel like, yes, I belong. I got to make it, like I said, I brought it up previously, that I think his interaction with Charles as an 8-year-old really skewed his view, and just like, it's probably part of that, like, that Hollywood system of it all that really kind of like chews you up and spits you out, and you kind of have to be a certain way to kind of make things happen. You had to be you had to be dickish, and I don't think he realized, I'm sure like on some level he felt like he could run over his brother because his brother was always there to pick up the pieces. His brother did so much for him, and he kind of took it for granted type of thing. Because I think for him, it's just, he didn't realize how much of a stable unit his brother, like how much of a stable environment his brother provided for him. And without that, how lost he would be. I mean, well, let's finish where we're at right now. But for him, like sewing with the ladies, it was calming, and he actually ran lines with them for the play. And I think it's just, you got to see a softer side to Ben that no one really got to know. And that was the confusing thing, because it's like, oh man, Ben was on cloud 9 when he left here. And then like 30 minutes later, before the play started and everything, in that 30-minute time frame from him leaving here, showing up to the play, and before the play started, where he went on stage and quote unquote died the first time, that it all went downhill. And I love that the episode like showed you just how much could go wrong in 30 minutes. I also love that the 2 of the women that they interacted with in that scene, one of them, the one that Oliver was like, oh yeah, sorry for calling you a whore. She's like, no, it's okay, I used to be one. And Oliver's like, okay, he didn't know how to process that. But that lady, if you've ever seen that actress, if you've ever seen Ozark, she was in season 3 of Ozark. She was Wendy and Marty's couple therapist. She was also in The Blacklist. She was, I want to say, 8, 9, and 10, I believe, or maybe it was just 9 and 10. I want to say it was 8, 9, and 10. But she played Glenn's mom in The Blacklist. So that's just so interesting seeing her. I was like, hey, and if I'm not mistaken, which I could easily be, I'm like, I don't think that's the same actress, but I was wondering if it was. That's not the actress, the one that was beside her that was holding the phone. I'm like, that's not the same actress from Iron Fist, is it? Wasn't she part of, I don't know if that's the same actress who was part of The Hand or not. I want to say she was in Daredevil, but I think she might have been in season 2 of Daredevil. I don't remember. She might have only been in Iron Fist, if I remember. But either way, because that really heavily dealt with The Hand. So either way, that might not be the same actress. I thought it was, but now in retrospect, I'm becoming less and less sure. But either way, like I said, it's just interesting getting to see that softer side of Ben. And obviously, the squad is like trying to piece out the timeline. And I love how they constructed that, where it's like, right, it's like the memories that are like, they're basically made like a mind palace construction. And they're basically they're watching the interrogations, and they're basically playing out everyone's scenarios of like, okay, this is what they were doing, and their interactions with Ben, from Cliff to Dickie to Loretta to Katie. But it's like, yeah, like Ben showed up with gifts for everyone because he had made with his sewing team. He made his sewing squad, his ladies. He ended up making those those handkerchiefs that he was going to hang out there, everyone is like, man, that's heartbreaking to know. Like, right, everyone, I mean, yes, he came off very dickish, but the fact, I mean, that's also the thing of like, that's also kind of a thing to always keep in mind. You never know what someone's going through. You know, I mean, to be fair, Ben had presented himself very dickishly, and once you do that, like, it taints the way people view you, but still. But yeah, he helped make those. Those weren't just like, oh, something he bought or had to, like, yes, other people helped make it, but he also was a part of that process. So those were very, like, specifically handcrafted. So people thought nothing of it, but those were important. So it makes that even sadder, now having the connotation connected to those, being, like, very, very personal gifts in that regard. But KT chewing him out for being late, Donna putting a lot of stress on him because it's like, hey, this needs to work, especially because this means a lot because it's my son's first production, so it needs to be a success. It can't fail. He blew up at Taubert and fired him. He, like, Loretta had convinced, and I love that we did at least get this scene because we got last episode I brought up. It's like, oh, it's kind of such a shame we never got, I mean, they did it on purpose, but it's such a shame we never got to see Loretta and Dickie had their moments. And we saw it last episode, like her kind of stepping into that motherly role. And we even got to see it this episode because he's like, oh yeah, he's got these like hives from Ben and stuff because of stressing out. And she's like, oh, like, did you like that ointment or whatever I had suggested to you? And it's like, how did we never see like how motherly she was? I mean, to be fair, we as the audience couldn't because, once again, a lot of that 4-month process of them working on this whole thing, like, we never really got to dive into. And it makes sense why, because it's meant to make it so that you as the audience member don't it's probably a lot to cover that plus all the other stuff that is just, it'd be too much. Maybe if the show was like, these episodes were like an hour long, they probably could have packed. Because, I mean, maybe I'm mistaken. I think the episodes this season seem a little bit longer. Cause I felt like all the episodes last season were less than 30 minutes. Like a little less, maybe like 28, 29. But it feels like every episode's pushing 40, maybe like 2 or 3 minutes short of 40, which I thought was interesting. So it does seem like they're leaning more to the more traditional. I mean, obviously this is streaming, so typically even without commercial breaks, it still would have been like 45. But, you know, some streaming stuff kind of pushes like that 50-minute mark or whatever. But either way, if the episodes were longer, maybe they would have sprinkled in some of the flashback stuff for that 4-month period, but maybe it's just like to keep the mystery angle of not having the full context of everything. It makes you go like, okay, like we are at a loss and we won't see the twists and turns coming even more so in that regard. But Loretta was convincing Dickie to leave Ben, and he wrote down all these bullet points, and Ben, being the big brother, being like, oh, let me see that, ha ha ha. Oh, not even the big brother, because he's the little brother in this situation, I forgot. But it's like, you know, it's like, oh, let me see, ha ha ha. Wait, you're leaving me? Wait, she's throwing a wrench in between you and me, and you're really going to do this? He's like, yeah, I'm tired of it all, like the way you treat me. And so now that adds more to him and Loretta's argument because that was about Dickie, which even I love Charles being like, man, when you actually listen to the dialogue from this from Death Rattle and compare it to what's going on right now, it's very on point to what they're going through. Where it's like, oh, here she is as the nanny protecting the children from like this investigator, but you know, and the real parallel being, oh, here is Dickie's biological mom protecting him from his abusive and manipulative little brother, you know. So that's so interesting. And then Charles stepped in and kind of ended up punching. So yeah, he stepped in at the right time because Ben was getting very aggressive. But it is that situation of it's sad because when they kind of finally got to the point where they're like, oh, who is Ben talking to? I'm like, is he talking to himself? I'm like, are we going to, first I was like, my immediate thought was, wait, are we going to start suggesting that Ben poisoned himself, but then ended up surviving, but then someone actually killed him? Because I thought that's who he was talking to. I was like, is that who he's talking to? And it's like, no, he was actually talking to a cookie that Cliff had left him. I was like, but that wouldn't make you think Cliff had poisoned him. But it's like, no, because Cliff had specifically left with the cookie, so someone else could have easily have brought it. We'll get to that in a second. Because it turns out Howard did his thing and was able to piece it together. Turns out it was Maxine's review. Someone had gotten an early copy of it, and then they ended up shredding it in KT's office when Howard tried to go in there to. And so that was an interesting development. But yeah, we get the reveal of who the killer is. Not unless there's going to be a last minute twist, but it feels like we're dead certain on who it is now. And it seems like it's Donna. She had all the motive. Because it turns out she got an early screening of Maxine's like review, and it turns out Maxine was the worst part of the play was Ben, and he would have sunk the whole thing. It is interesting, and I think it does speak volumes that Maxine has, I mean, at least from what we've seen so far, she definitely has a more positive stance on this, which I also think is interesting because Charles wanted to read the review, and then Mabel stopped him, like, no, you don't have to, this is kind of not, it's like, oh, Maxine probably tore him to shreds too, which I think speaks volumes. If Ben is such an issue, what does that mean about Charles? That Charles probably did slightly better than Ben, and that probably would have dashed his hope, because he does have this self-confidence that kind of comes from nowhere to some extent. But I brought it up last episode when it was time for his part. To be fair, it was just so they could keep Williams distracted, but he still murdered it. He did his thing. So I think, and Maxine witnessed that, so she definitely has a better opinion of Charles, I'm sure, than whatever was for that dry run of everything. But Donna didn't want her son's first production to be a failure. I was actually, before they really even said that, I was kind of, once again, thinking the opposite. I was thinking like, oh, is Donna trying to sink her son's production because they have that twisted relationship? And I thought it was almost going to be that Munchausen by proxy type of situation. Not like in a sense of, oh, making you sick, but I'm going to make you fail so you're even more reliant on me. I thought initially that's the route they were going, but what she didn't want his first production to be a failure. To be fair, his failure would have meant a stain against her name. But so it's probably a combination of, maybe it was more self-preservation for her reputation because it still would have been her name attached to it. But it also could be like, oh, I don't want my sweet dear boy to be so disheartened and heartbroken about this, so I want to protect him from it. But, like I said, I kind of went into more you murdered someone, so it's still a negative aspect, but I went even a more pessimistic route of like, oh, you're just wanting him to latch onto you even more. I mean, once again, still could be some level of that, because once again, they have their weird relationship. But yeah, she has like the motive and the opportunity. She was in the room with the rat poison, and she nudged Ben, being like, yeah, go back in your room, your dressing room, treat yourself. But yeah, it turns out the person that Ben was talking to wasn't even, it was kind of himself, but it was more so about the cookie. It's like, and I love how Mabel figured it out. She figured it out because of the way Oliver, I have to stop myself every time because I want to say Martin, because I always have to like stop myself. It's like, stop saying Martin Short's actual name and talk about his character's name. I keep doing that because I kind of have to stop myself with Charles too from saying Steve Martin. But either way, he ended up like gorging on that cookie, and he's the one that wrote effing pig. Like I said, he had a lot of self-esteem issues. He just never thought he was good enough. That was something that they implemented earlier in the season, and you've definitely seen that more and more. And the past couple episodes really leaned into that he had the whole like really suffered from some self-esteem stuff. So it seems like Donna is the one who did it. But that's why I'm saying like there might be a last minute twist, because part of me wonders, Donna might have poisoned him, but maybe she wasn't the one that actually fully killed him, because she probably poisoned him, but it wasn't enough and he survived. It might be a thing of he had like enough. This might be the twisted thing that like the only reason why the rat poison didn't kill him is because he got medical attention fast enough, or maybe it's just like it wasn't enough. She didn't give him enough to kill him because maybe he's had like, what movie or TV show is it that used the phrase like a Belushi level amount of coke in your body or something like that? There was something, I can't remember what it was, but there's some reference to like how much drugs is in someone's system. It was like a Belushi crap load or something like that. I don't remember what movie or TV show that's a specific phrasing from. But part of me was wondering, like, well, he has had drug issues in the past, so it could be that his body has such a tolerance, so maybe his amount of drugs, I'm not saying it equates to real life, but I'm wondering, like, if that's what's supposed to be, like, why the poison didn't stick. Because maybe Donna just, I mean, as we saw, she didn't, like, it wasn't mixed into the cookie, she sprinkled on a cookie. She did a couple dabs, but we have no idea how much she really put up there. Two, it could just be, like, his constitution was just enough to able to handle it. Like, it could just be, like, yeah, like, he was just fortunate enough that it wasn't enough to kill him. Maybe it could have killed anyone else. He was just lucky, or just that amount wouldn't have killed any human being, because obviously poison also is varied by, like, there's so many factors that, will affect how much the rate of poison affects you, whether it's your age, your height, your weight. All of those are contributing factors in how quickly or how slowly a poison will spread to your body. So a lot of that probably plays a role in it. So, but like I said, part of me was wondering if it had anything to do with his past with drugs, and if that made it so, like, he had some slight higher than above average tolerance for poison in his body, considering he's done probably a lot of hardcore drugs in his days. So, but either way, my other point was, well, what if it was a twofer? What if Donna tried to kill Ben but didn't? And what if it wasn't Donna who pushed him down the elevator shaft? What if it was Cliff for whatever reason? Well, not unless we end up finding out that, once again, I had to pause because I was about to say Paul, if Ben found out that it was Donna that tried to kill him and Cliff did it to protect his mom. So it could be a twofer of, like, it feels very poetic if both of them were responsible. Yes, Donna attempted to murder him, but Cliff's the one that actually did it. They both take the fall for it, but, which I think would be a very, very interesting parallel if you kind of compared it a little bit to Theo's situation. How his dad protected him. I think that would be an interesting parallel. That's kind of, in some regards, of like that protective parent situation. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Before we get to the end of the episode, some other storyline bits I want to talk about a little bit is there was that sweet moment with Mabel when she ended up, when they brought the dip over to her because it's her 30th birthday. Because the reason why she had that dream at the beginning of the episode is her mom had sent over that letter about, hey, like, this is 10-year-old me believing, like, this is what I'm going to be when I'm older. And it's like, well, what would 10-year-old Mabel say about you? It's like, oh, she'd be horrified, but who fucking cares? Like, what did that 10-year-old Mabel really know about anything? For her, she enjoys where she is now in life. She really appreciates. She even says later on what she wished on, like, her birthday candle was, being with her two besties doing murder stuff, which obviously that could be misconstrued out of context, but obviously solving murder stuff, but still, it's really sweet. It's like, oh, I got my besties, like, because I brought that up previously, like, outside of Oliver and Charles, I mean, for one, neither one of them really has any friends outside of each other. Like, Mabel only has those two, and those two really only have her. Like, I don't know there's anyone we'd honestly say are, like, I don't think we've ever seen Charles have any real friends. I say Saz is, like, the closest thing to only other friend he really has, and we haven't really seen Oliver have any friends. He has, like, connections, and stuff like that. Like, I mean, Maxine and him are good, but I don't know if they'd call themselves friends, but I don't know. I'm sure there are people Oliver would think of as friends. It's like, we're not really friends. We're just, like, mutual career path, like, companions and associates. But yeah, they that trio kind of mainly has each other. I mean, but that's what besties are, It's like, right, these are my two best friends in the world, and we somehow make it. We're an odd coupling, but we make it work. I even love them showing up at, it's like, oh, like, put on Joy's wedding dress, and kind of, it's like, right, that's why we can rush down to the courtroom and stop Loretta from confessing, which I love. Oliver's like, wow, you look great. And she's like, oh, really? She's like, oh, you look great. He's like, oh, and this whole thing? I thought that was cute. But speaking of Joy's wedding dress, it turned out that, she had ordered, it was from her mom. I think it was like her mom's wedding dress that Joy was going to use to, because that happened pretty quickly. Because to be fair, I guess, like, you move pretty quickly, especially. But it's like, I was about to say, like, they were only engaged for like 2 days, and it's like, right, that in that time frame, I guess. I mean, you're going to let everyone know, so her mom probably had that special, like, I guess Joy was everything was happening, and either she didn't tell her parents it got called off, or it was already kind of in transit by the time it showed up. But either way, it turns out Joy's with Scott now. I don't think, like, they're together, but I think it's the thing of, oh, she's doing Scott's makeup, and so I don't know if that's indicative of, like, they are together. I'm hopeful that her and but once again, it's that thing of once an engagement is kind of broken off, it's hard to really continue a relationship post that. So maybe they'll find their way back to each other, maybe not. Because none of them are really doing well in the department of life, because Oliver's kind of in the situation he's in, which I love that it's like, oh yeah, you know, the woman I'm in love with is like, I thought you guys were just hooking up. He's like, oh, we did hook up. We hooked up and down, and we don't need to hear all that. But Charles' love life is kind of down the tanker, and Mabel's still trying to figure stuff out. You know, it's like, right, you're 30 and you're killing it better than me when it comes to life. I mean, because, you know, I'm like a year older than Mabel. I'd assume me and Selena, like, even in real life, I'd assume Selena's I know she's in her early 30s. Yeah, she's 31 as well. She's like, I'm like a little less than a month older than her. But either way, so, you know, her character of Mabel's definitely got things a lot more figured out than me, even when she's lost. But it's like, yeah, you're still young enough that it's like you got quite a bit of time to kind of still figure stuff out. So, but either way, they were able to try and stop Loretta, but Loretta's like, yeah, I've already committed down this route. So she's probably like, I've probably already done enough that I don't know if I could probably pull back. But it's like, oh, who is the real killer? And then all of a sudden they turn and they see Donna's in the courtroom. So once again, either there's going to be some last minute twist that it wasn't Donna, or we're going to find something else out, or it's going to be a situation. Like I said, my final predictions and bets, I'm thinking it's going to be a twofer of Donna and Cliff. I think they're going to be the ones responsible. Because, once again, they were saying that she was in and out of the party, so she could have easily slipped out to kill him, but we don't know for sure. She probably might not have had time to go kill him, but maybe Cliff did. Maybe they were both there, and then Cliff heard the whole thing. Like I said, he could have confronted Donna and be like, oh, I know you tried to poison me, or maybe Donna confronted him, whatever the case may be, and then Cliff came and killed Ben. Not unless we find out, no, it was 100% Donna, and now Cliff's finding out about his mom, and that's going to be the end of it all, that he has to kind of continue on without his mom. But I feel like it's more poetic and befitting if they both go down for this, that they're both responsible. So we'll see. I feel like that will be the route they go, but that's my final prediction for this. We'll ultimately have to wait and see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the season finale. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.